Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you for joining us. My name again is Doug Cook. I'll be your host for tonight. I'm the Education Events Coordinator for NOFA Mass. Along with me is Anna Gilbert Muhammad, our Food Access and Webinar Coordinator. Before we get started, I would like to thank all of the NOFA Mass board and staff who've contributed to the production of this webinar. And as well, we want to thank our sponsors. We are sponsored by Real Pickles, Dr. Bronner's, and Eaton Hemp tonight. Real Pickles is a worker cooperative based in Greenfield, Mass, producing 100% organic, raw, fermented vegetables sourced from Northeast Family Farms and available at local stores and online at realpickles.com. Dr. Bronner's makes pure Castile soap, hair and body care products of the highest quality and are committed to socially and environmentally responsible products, all one. And Eaton Hemp is your trusted source for USDA organic CBD products, always organic, always transparent. Most importantly, we want to thank you, the viewers and listeners, especially our members who make our education and advocacy work possible. If you find this event useful and inspiring, please become a NOFA Mass member or make a donation to support our important work. I am very pleased to introduce our presenter, Ricky Baruch. Ricky is the co-founder of Seeds of Solidarity Farm and Education Center, along with his partner, Deb Habib. Also, he is the co-organizer of the North Quabbin Garlic and Arts Festival in Orange, Mass, and co-author of Making Love While Farming, a field guide to life of passion and purpose, from Levelers Press. Welcome, Ricky. I'll turn it over to you, and you can say a few words about yourself before we show the first video.
Thank you all. I think a big piece is the lens that I see these videos through is that all life is sacred and life in the soil is sacred. And the other piece is what I call farming without farmland. And what that means is we want farming to continue for the youth of color, indigenous youth. We got to find ways that it's inexpensive. And when I say farming without farmland, I'm talking about not starting with real soil, any soil at all. No need for machinery costs. Basically all local resources for your fertilizer amendments, minimal labor inputs. And the goal is that your soil is richer every year, but really the thing is, if we want to continue, the paradigm is changing rapidly, as we all know. If we want farming to continue, we want young people to get into it. The old paradigm is done. Farmland, big barn, lots of equipment, that's not working anymore. So it's really about grow food everywhere and figure out how to do it on the cheap. So thanks for being here.
All the worms. Let's see, there's one that had a coating on worms. Here a second. Here we go. Here you go. Here, come here. Quick. Okay, you ready? Go. Look at all those worms. That's what cardboard does. So there was spinach here, and I just covered the spinach. You can see the spinach, and look at those worms. That's what we're talking about. So the amount of labor I saved, I could have pulled that spinach out, but instead I just covered with cardboard. And look at those worms. He's just loaded. Okay. Let's see if I get a good hand. Oh, right there. Look at that. Just loaded. Tilling makes no sense. It destroys the life in the soil. And you just basically cover the soil with cardboard and plant right through it. And you got the famous no-till. Look at that. Oh, look at that. Cardboard method. Look at that. Look at them all. That is what you call life in the soil. And the beautiful thing of it is they're kind of like the, oh my gosh, look at that. You can get it. I pick up trucks. I've gotten one load of cardboard. I was able to do an area 35 feet wide by 100 feet. So that's basically a small mini farm of cardboard. But you can see big boxes like this over the other side. Okay, So then what you do is you mark out the holes. Today we have, since it's still a cool time of year, we have some kale, collards, broccoli, things like that. So they have to be closer together. But if there's tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, to be further. Basically, you mark your hole. And then proceed to take out the cardboard. Got the existing soil. This would be perfect when someone has a lawn. There's not anything to write home without soil. You can put that soil right on the cardboard, the cardboard for blowing away. And you can see there's nothing to write home about. There's rocks. Okay, right? Now we put in some compost. Finished compost, not the stuff sitting right next to your sink, but the finished stuff. Put the finished compost in. Put your bok choy in. Pat it down. You can spread this around. You just do the same thing. Hole, 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 hole. Now what we do is come in and mulch. The worms and other microbes are going to break down that cardboard and all that sod. And by next season, you'll just have bare ground. And then what we tell people is you make a raised bed, basically by digging a trench 3.5 feet apart. So you have a nice raised bed. And then you also could then add cardboard on top of that bed. And that's what we call a no-till self-sustaining cardboard method, where each year you just keep adding cardboard. And now you have an instant garden. We're getting some cool shit, huh? Get any cooler than this? Very cool. I got a very cool. Did I get any other cool? It's the coolest. What's today's slang?
Yeah.
Dope.
It's the shit.
It's the shit. There you go. It's the shit. Give us some modern day. We're kind of old fashioned. It's the compost. Is that right? So you can imagine. Right, ready for this? Because of this population, most likely, you ready for this? 1 acre of land, which is quite a bit of land, per year will produce 150 tons of worm poop every year. With chips down, we got compost. You could also use leaf mold, which is old leaves. You can get from your local landfill, just piles of leaves broken down. So now we got the compost down. Once again, we nice big piece of cardboard. And we have previous method, we could do the cutout method, plant right through. Another great method is using dibbles. All kinds of dibbles out in the market. Italy, from Holland. It's nice to have a metal point, really strong. And they're a lot easier once they get wet. So what you can do is wood chips, compost, cardboard, wet the cardboard, and then just right through it. So now the seed is going with some nice compost. You put a bunch of plants all along here, and then we just put some mulch around it, and once again have an instant garden. Crops are just like humans. They don't want fluctuations. No one likes the ups and downs of life, right? Some people get off it, but we won't go there. But that said, side note, the point is that when we moderate it, it wants a constant moisture, nice and steady. It doesn't want, you have it exposed, the sun's out, it's drying out, it's flipping out. Too much rain, it flips out. The cardboard's going to keep it moderated. Also, if you have heavy rains, it will also moderate it. If it's dry, it will moderate it. So it's quite an amazing thing. It's just like the forest floor. And it's a balanced system, just like the forest. There's nothing more balanced than the ecosystem of those leaves and the trees that whole cycle.
So look at this whole thing. You just got, yeah. Just make sure you overlap 4 inches. What is it? So somebody's got enough color. I wouldn't recommend using anything coloring, but most of the stuff you're going to get is just like this. So it's the whole thing, man. You want the whole thing. All the go.
Ooh, I'm like, so fine. Oh my gosh, all the fluff of the cardboard goes to taste. You know, but in your own garden, go ahead and take it off. In your own garden, take it off.
The whole idea is never till, because tilling is a fallacy. And the only reason farmers continue to till to this day is we haven't figured out how to deal with the previous crop's residue. So we say, oh, well, I'll till it in. So, and then people say, oh, you got to aerate the soil. Think about the largest trees in the world, redwoods. There's no little mechanized piece of equipment cruising around aerating it. So, millions and millions of years for the soil to be built up, figured out with all the microbes and bacteria. So we certainly don't need some equipment going in there messing with it. Okay. So not only does the cardboard method allow you not to have to till, it makes the most beautiful soil when you're done with it. So basically, get a nice rake. We have a rake right now. You level it out as best you can with a shovel. And then we scatter sow seed. So that's the quickest way with the cardboard method. But you think about it, in an hour or so, you can have quite a large kitchen garden of greens. I use the silage tarps at the end, so that there's no weeds growing, and then when I'm ready to plant, the weeds are dead. Put the cardboard down again. Every year you put the cardboard down, that's your fertilizer, it's your weed control, it's your moisture control. So, remember with the group, we put down the cardboard, I put some compost on top. Look how simple it is, just like that, pop it in the ground. I'm putting a popcorn here. And think about it. So at this point, no CO2 has been released, no tilling necessary. The amount of time that's been saved is enormous, and the soil hasn't been disturbed. Okay, here we are looking at the cardboard in the corn 2 months later. You can see all where the cardboard is, aren't any weeds. We put cardboard down first in some rough manure. Oh, there they are. Here's the first worm we found, which is pretty cool. Oh, it's full of worms. Look at that. Full of worms right there, full of worms. They're doing their thing. And you got the corn growing. What's neat about it is you go anywhere else, most farms, you'll never see worms at this height. They're so right up the surface, which is quite, look at that. It's just full of worms. Here's the kale and collards that we planted first week. Cut out the cardboard, put some compost in, and then we planted the seedlings. And you can see here's the compost. Actually, you see the cardboard. It's already starting to break down. Oh, look at the worms. Here you go. There they are doing their thing. Holy smokes, who would have thunk it? That's it. Take greenhouse growing in cardboard, garlic in cardboard, corn in cardboard. Well, we did that. And then the take one, that's 4 things. We did that. Take greenhouse growing cardboard, garlic in cardboard.
Thanks for making that video, and Levi, right? Would you mind recapping the steps there that we just saw?
So the 3 different ways of doing it, if you have transplants, large transplants like tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, and you have a lawn, cardboard goes down, cut out the cardboard, take out the soil, put in compost, put in your transplant, mulch around it, instant garden for big transplants. The other technique is you have things like kale, chard, collards that you're planting close together. You have your sod, you put about a 4 or 5 inch layer of compost, put the cardboard on top, put some mulch on top of that, straw, hay, and then you can dibble right through it every 12 inches. The dibble. And then the third technique is for cut and come again greens is you actually have your sod, you put down the cardboard, and then you put another 4 or 5 inches of good finished compost on top of that, scatter sow your seeds, you're good to go. So for all 3 ways of using cardboard.
Do you have recommendations on the type of mulch to be using? And one specific question was about the colored mulches that we see out there. What do you think about those?
I think it's probably a good idea. So now, definitely stay away. Least expensive if you're in a farming community is you can get mulch hay, meaning it got wet out in the field, the farmer can't use it. That's the cheapest. Mulch hay, straw, grass clippings, wood chips are great. Rotted leaves, actually that's a great one because all landfills collect leaves and it's basically black gold. It's gorgeous. And there's no weed seeds in it. Seaweed.
Are there any things in the cardboard that we should be worried about, chemicals that we should take consideration?
Great question. At the festival a couple of years ago, I met a woman that's in the recycling world and kind of an expert around all this sort of stuff. And it's all soy-based glues, inks, and it's all hide glue. And that's one of the reasons the hide glue has a lot of protein in it. And that's why the worms really are attracted to the cardboard. So it's safe. You don't want to use cardboard that has lots of, color to it. But basically brown, standard cardboard. Bicycle stores, furniture stores, things like that.
Some folks are asking, is it too late to start with this method?
No, that's the beauty of it. Like that, those 3 methods I just mentioned, as long as you can get cardboard and compost, good quality compost, tomorrow morning, go at it. My whole thing was like, even do it in your neighbor's lawn when they go off and they come home and 2 hours later they have a garden on their front lawn.
And should we be concerned with any pesticides in the mulch that we use?
That's a really, I guess grass clippings could be an issue, but leaf mold, that's why leaf mold, I think, from leaves would be a really safe bet.
Should wood chips be aged?
Well, the main thing is as long as the wood chips, which are high in carbon, are above ground, it's not an issue. The whole issue of high carbon material is actually if you put it into the ground, the microbes are going to get hungry. They're going to go after that carbon, but in order to eat that carbon, the brown stuff, they steal nitrogen. So as long as it's above ground, it's not an issue. And the real rage right now is what they call remial chips. And what that is more like the branches. So we see a power company coming through asking for those chips, because especially in the springtime, all the life force is into those branches. And that's kind of the rage right now. A lot of farmers are using them in the pathways of the raised beds. So remial chips.
Another question coming through from Joan saying, I've had trouble with switchgrass, ferns, and lily of the valley poking through after the cardboard, compost, and mulch is applied. Any advice?
More cardboard. Yeah, you really can't. You could definitely, if you know you're going to deal with a heavy situation of hardcore weeds, put another layer of cardboard on.
That's a good segue to the next little video that we have. Do you want to mention anything about silage tarps before we get started?
Well, this is a great thing around the silage tarps is I think a lot of farming is, kind of happenstance. You learn from your mistakes. We were using compost, which was wonderful for many years. We started spreading it out, and a few days later, I noticed all the compost was producing lamb's quarters. So I had 100-foot beds of lamb's quarters. And I said, how am I going to get rid of them? So that's how I came across the silage tarps. And so it was kind of an accident turned into a great thing because I really realized, wow, these silage tarps have a lot of potential. So that's how I got turned on to them. So really, cardboard's my favorite because that's actually building the soil. But silage tarp is also wonderful. And the way I look at it is If you're going to transplant, use cardboard. But if you need bare soil, Tarps is the ticket.
Incredible. So this bed here looks like that bed 7 days ago. So 7 days later, all that organic matter has broken down into this. Years ago, before you used the silage trucks, we'd actually have to hoe out all the greens, take them out of the greenhouse, compost them, and start all over again. All I have to do is put this down for 7 days. All that organic matter breaks on the soil. I don't have to remake the bed if I rototilled it. And look at it, it's gorgeous. And now basically this afternoon, I'll just come in here, put some compost and replant. So there's 3 tools in the no-till toolkit that I use. Cardboard, my ultimate favorite, silage tarps, and cover crops. Right now, I'm just going to talk about silage tarps. But when anyone thinks of cover crops, they always think of, I got to till them in, I got to till them in. So what I'm going to show here is using cover crops with the silage tarp, and after 17 days, it's gorgeous. Before I pull it back, most growers know that rye is one of the most tenacious cover crops to deal with. So remember, now I'm going to till it in, so you're not disturbing the soil, releasing CO2. You cover it, and in the greenhouse, 17 days later, it's gone. So granted, it's a little quicker in the greenhouse than outside, but it's just planting. And especially with farmers in the springtime, they have a cover crop, it's wet, they can't get on the ground anyway. So using the tarps, kills the cover crops. And what's really amazing about the silage tarps is the gorgeous tilt. So this will just, as you can see, just comes right out. It's all dead. But think about the amount of labor that has been saved rather than that. You till that, you're bringing weed seeds up that never seen the light before are coming up. You're releasing CO2 in the air and you're completely destroying the soil, as well as then you have to make a new raised bed. This way, I cover it, I pull it back, I put some compost, and I plant. I don't have to remake the bed, but basically in my mind, one of the most beautiful seed beds is what the cover crop, what the silage tarp does. So imagine 17 days later, from this to this, it's pretty phenomenal. In 17 days, as long as you plan ahead, it works. So let's go to the cover crop field that we have down here. This is really cool. Go down here. So here we have rye below the garlic, and there's rye above the garlic. So this is a cover crop, and we're going to let it grow for maybe another 3 weeks. It'll be about this high, and then we're actually going to lay out a string, put down some compost, and plant right into it corn seedlings, also winter squash seedlings. So what will happen is the corn will grow, we'll let the winter squash grow, the winter rye grow, another row of corn, winter rye, corn, winter rye. And we'll do the same thing with the winter squash. So the beautiful thing about it is that the winter rye will continue to grow, keep the weeds from coming up, and it will also grow with the corn and with the winter squash. Doing is we have a crop of rye, and we really want to keep the rye growing. It takes CO2 out of the air, so this will continue to grow. Meanwhile, we're strip composting here, and the corn will also grow. So it's double use of the land. And then when it's all said and done, we'll silage tarp the whole thing, and it'll make gorgeous soil for next season. So we have cover crops growing at the same time as our corn crop. One of the reasons no-till is really taking off in the farming world is the speed and efficiency. You can farm. Usually you have a bed of rye. You have to come in and till it. You got to wait a certain amount of days for all that rye to break down. In this case, we tarped it, waited for the tarp to break it down, lifted the tarp up, composted, and planted right away the same day. So we got to plant it. In this case, we knock down the rye, we put some compost on it, and we dribble right through it. You can see the bounciness of it. That's the rye underneath. A little bit of the rye popping up. But the beautiful thing about it, that rye is breaking down without disturbing the soil. It's breaking down right above the roots. So as it breaks down, all that nutrition will actually go to the roots. So I'll be really interested in seeing the difference between this bok choy and that bok choy. But this is a good example of two beds planted into rye quickly. So this is solid tarps on the largest scale. You can get sheets from 50 to 100 feet long. So we do quite a large area. This is just sitting here. So I plan on planting garlic in the fall. It's the middle of May. So it's just kind of resting. Everything's breaking down. And by the time I need to plant, it'll be beautiful. The beautiful thing about the whole no-till is you have all your land covered, ultimately. Between the greenhouses, we have some rye. In front of it, we have some cardboard covered with some manure. But basically, try to keep all the land covered just like the forest floor. And then when you're ready to plant, I might plant corn there. Here's an example of cardboard with a little manure on top of it. And we have onions, leeks growing in it. And radicchio, no weeds, knock on wood. So that's the beautiful thing about it, is I'm a solo farmer, and I can grow lots of land, but I don't have to deal with the weeds. But the beautiful thing is that soil's gonna be richer next year, because all that cardboard is gonna break down to some gorgeous soil. This is kind of cool just to see. This is the ground what we started with, and this is what we built it up to after the last 20, 23 years. Years of just adding good compost and lots of cardboard. We got gorgeous soil now. You can see cardboard from last year. It really gives you a sense of how much you can make soil, you can build soil. This is, basically the land when we came on here really wasn't much. It was definitely not agricultural land. And look at this. And I think that's really the future of agriculture. Let's make sure we get a nice shot of the dolly greenhouse. It's really beautiful. This is no-till at its finest. These beds have never been tilled. 30-foot by 96-foot greenhouse. The crops speak for themselves. The vibrant colors, full of life force strata. We have a bed of rye all the way in, but all the rest of it is so full of greens. We've been harvesting since March. It's a new crop coming in of bok choy down there and some chard and dandelion greens. It's just full of life, full of color. We've never tilled. Here's another example of the silage tarps. 8 days later, the greens are all gone. Maybe not use that one. Oh gosh, look at that.
Back to you, Ricky. We have a couple of questions coming in. I think we'll start with the material that the tarps are made of. Can you speak to the type of tarp, where you might get it, and you've used other material, other types?
Where we use is silage tarps. When you go by a dairy farm, you'll see a big pile. They make their silage under it. Is a tarp, and then you'll see the tires on top of it. So that's what they use it for. It's silage tarps. So we're repurposing it basically. One way to get it's billboards.com. Supposedly you can get recycled silage tarps that way. And there are actually a lot of farmers and people going in on lots of them, meaning that farmers, don't use them anymore and getting truckloads of them. So there are inexpensive ways to go about it, but the way we talk about it is kind of appropriate technology. It's a good use of oil because we could use the tarps for maybe 10 to 15 years. And it's very heavy, heavy, heavy duty. It's not like black plastic where you actually are planting your tomatoes through. So this is very heavy duty stuff. In Europe, it's called occultation, darkness. And the other cool thing about it is when you put the tarps down, the warmth, the first flush of seedlings come up, weed seed come up, and they die because there's no light. So it's pretty cool that way too, to create a stale seedbed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you made an important point that these are designed to be moved, removed, not planted into and left on the ground year round. Another question came back was, do you rake back the bed or rake any leaves off before you?
Great question. It all depends how long the tarp was on, but that's the beauty of it is that, especially in the greenhouses, in that amount of time, it's basically done. I usually just put the compost right on top of whatever organic matter is left, but it's easy to rake off. But the most magnificent part of the whole thing is I've been farming for 30 years now. There is nothing that makes a seed bed like the tarp. I guaranteed, you know, because all farmers are about tilling the soil, making that perfect seed bed with equipment, but they can never, never guaranteed will get a seed bed as beautiful as with the tarp, with microorganisms. So that's a fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned that the tarps do last a pretty long time.
Oh yeah, very long.
Another question came in, can these techniques be used for vineyards and fruit orchards?
Most definitely. Cardboard's great, salad tarp's great, and the cover crops. All three of them work wonderfully for, especially with vineyards or fruit trees, you know, heavy duty weeds. There's no reason you can't put a couple layers of cardboard down. Like I said in the video earlier, one truckload of cardboard can do it. A big truck, a pickup truck, it is able to do an area 35 feet wide by 100 feet. So that's like a mini farm with one truck. So it's really appropriate use.
Yeah. And another question, just to clarify, why can't a regular tarp be used?
Well, the regular tarps, what you'll see, basically are woven, and the light will actually get through. It's similar to what they call landscape fabric. It's similar to that. It's woven. This is very thick, solid, and hence the whole occultation. And it's actually, herb farmers actually use it today to cover their greenhouses for complete darkness. So no light can actually get through. They call them panda covers because there's white on one side, black another. But farm supply stores have it. Peaceful Valley Farm Supply has it. That's out on the West Coast. But a lot of places, and a neat thing you can do is actually get it, because they come in very large sheets, you can cut it up and, you know, share it with your neighbors.
Mm-hmm. And would you go through the timeline of when you might be planting your cover crop and maybe different types of cover crops you use at different types of season, and when do you apply the tarps?
Great question. What I really like about the rye is the ground could be 35 degrees, so it's pretty darn chilly, and most other weed seeds don't want to come up. So basically, you can get in there very early, scatter sow your rye seed, and get it going really early in the spring. Or if you want, you could actually start in the end of the summer, and it will, you know, survive through the winter, hence winter rye, and do it in the spring. But why it works for me so well is I can get on the ground real early. So basically, I've had the tarps down all winter. Early spring, pull the tarps back, scatter sow rye, put a little layer of compost on top, wet it, and I have a nice rye crop. In a couple of months, it grows really quick, and about a foot high is when I start actually planting into it. So it really times out perfectly, because I can get it in early in the spring. I get up to a foot high, and by that point, my corn seedlings or my winter squash seedlings are ready to go in. And then I do that technique with the kind of a strip of compost. The other cover crops I really love is buckwheat, which grows incredibly fast. Buckwheat, Sudan grass, or sorghum is also wonderful. Grows 12 feet tall. A great technique where you could actually have a garden bed where you have your vegetables in one bed, next bed, grow the Sudan grass, cut it as a mulch, put it onto the bed. A lot of farmers use oats, which will actually winter kill. So people are actually growing oats, planting their garlic into it in the fall. It will winter kill and be the mulch. So there's a multitude, and now they can like cover crop cocktails. So there's no end to cover crops.
And when you have a 1 foot tall, you know, rye crop, do you cut or mow or otherwise crimp or do anything to plant it out?
Yeah, so it really works well. So you have this 1 foot rye crop. I lay out a string, I put down the compost, it just knocks it down. And once it's basically knocked down and covered with about 2 inches of compost, it's not coming back. And so that's when I dibble right through it with the fancy dibble here. And the beautiful thing about it is that crimping is wonderful, where you actually crimp the rye and plant into that. But the issue with crimping is the rye doesn't really last that long as a mulch, and then the weeds start happening. The beautiful thing about this technique is the compost covered the rye, the corn's growing up, but then I have rye growing next to it for maybe a foot wide, 2 feet, or 3 feet wide to the next row of corn. So basically, there's really no weed pressure because it's not coming up through the compost, because all that rye below it is really matted and keeping the weeds from coming up. But then you have living rye on either side. So it seems to really be a better technique than the crimping, because what a lot of farmers are finding with the crimping method, they actually have to come back later and add some more mulch.
Mm-hmm. And we have a few questions about your mystical assistant helping you out. Would you?
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hey, everybody. I'm Deb, Habib. We're partners in all things Seeds of Solidarity. I primarily run our nonprofit organization, but I definitely use these techniques in community settings. For example, if you have with the cardboard method, if you have like wooden raised beds outside of schools or faith-based institutions or in community gardens, you can certainly, at the end of the season, lay cardboard in and on those, and you'll, experience similar effects. So thanks for asking. I spent enough time in front of the computer, so I'm off to the side right now.
And someone asked, what is the best way to get rid of weeds in a small space?
I say cardboard if you're going to transplant through it, but if you need a bare ground to plant, little greens, I would use the silage tarps. Both are great. And they're pros and cons.
Another question, do you use irrigation?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about the corn, and I really got it a few years ago when we had a drought, was the cardboard, I should say, is that I took the group out and I showed them, an 8-foot tall crop of corn, and underneath the cardboard, it was incredibly moist. The worms are up to the top level, and I said, look, Hadley loam is some of the best soil in the country, but I can guarantee you, you go to Hadley, there are no worms up top there or that level of moisture. So the moisture under the cardboard is phenomenal. So minimal irrigation, but in the greenhouses where I don't use cardboard because it's all direct sown, scatter sown seeds, I use irrigation. My favorite irrigation is what they call a wobbler. Really simple device you can get from Farm Tech. They're called wobblers. That's the ticket.
Okay. I add something about the cardboard and moisture also, because that's a huge one. We know that not only is water precious, but at times we're getting just extremes of water due to all the changes we're seeing with climate change and disruption. So the cardboard not only maintains the moisture in the soil, but it also will serve as a barrier for excess water also, so things won't wash away as easily and so forth. It helps moderate that. And again, to reiterate, because I saw some people asking questions about compost, these methods, be it with the cardboard inviting microbial life and worm activity, which are then producing so many worm castings and creating such a rich living environment, you're essentially composting in place, with the cardboard. And the same with the cover crops and the silage tarp, by the silage tarps will result in that biomass basically composting in place as well. So not only is it the no-till, not releasing carbon through tilling or the use of mechanization, but you're really, with both techniques, especially the cardboard, composting in place.
Yeah. And then that leads into a nice question. This someone asked, I'll read it out. I have lots of sand in my yard where a pool used to be and don't have the ability to remove it all. Can I just build soil over using the cardboard method, or do I need to pay to have the sand removed?
Right, that's a great question. Well, the reality is that where we purchased land was basically forest. So we basically we cleared the forest And in order to put the greenhouses up, we had to actually level the ground. So the most inexpensive way to level the ground was actually sand. So those beautiful greenhouses has a layer of sand, and then we got rough compost, meaning it's not fully composted. And then we topped it off with fine compost at the top, and we started planting. So yeah, keep the sand there.
Mm-hmm.
Good question.
And when you've established your beds, can you still use this method of layering on top of them?
Totally. That's why we call it a self-sustaining no-till cardboard method. So the ultimate goal is, as long as there's still businesses, things are changing rapidly right now, but if you can get cardboard, that basically becomes the fertilizer. And so, you're kind of tweaking down, the dialing back the amount of compost you need, but the cardboard becomes the fertilizer. So year after year, if you're going to use transplants, use cardboard. And really the big thing about the cardboard is the worms. Everything that worm eats comes out 5 to 10 times richer out the back end. And worms are going at it year round, pooping and having sex. The thing about the cardboard is the birds can't get at them. So they're very thankful for using the cardboard.
And Amy asked, do we have to worry about decomposing plants that have pest infestation?
Well, that's a great question. Great question. Boy, if you want, I guess, if you're really concerned, like, especially if it was more like a fungal issue, if it had fungus, I would remove the plants. But otherwise, there is so much going on in the soil. And I'm really a real advocate of someone like Paul Stamets that, they're cleaning up, bioremediating, diesel fuel, nuclear waste with mushrooms. So nature is phenomenal. And the whole thing is that we really, as humans, have no idea, what's really going on in the soil. And it's really about, honoring the soil and let the soil work for you.
Mm-hmm. And a couple of people are intrigued about that garlic planting method into cover crop you mentioned. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, basically what you would do is you'd start the oats in the summer. You have a nice crop of oats. Then you would put your string. That's what I use, so I have a straight line. And then I dibble in with the famous dibble, the one tool I use. Dibble in the cloves of garlic. And so it's fall. Your garlic's in the ground. Your oats have grown through the summer. And then what's going to happen is the winter happens and they'll die. And they'll winter kill. And there's other cover crops you could use that you would basically want cover crops that will not survive the winter. So you grow them in the summer, you put your crop in, it dies, it's the mulch, and then your garlic pops up. So basically, using cover crops that will winter kill it will be perfect for garlic.
You want to mention that you've done some garlic and cardboard?
And we also have actually plant garlic in through the cardboard, which actually works out quite well. So we have our raised beds. We put down the cardboard, some hay on top of that. And as long as it gets wet, it's very easy to dibble through. And the nice thing about it is less weeds. But really, it's all about the life in the soil. And the real big thing that we're real advocates about is that, there's all sorts of the roots are all communicating. And so every time you till, you stop that communication. And then they start growing again, they start communicating again. So really the ultimate goal is not to till. So all that life is happening, all that communication is happening, and you're actually eating food like nature intended, as opposed to what our crazy minds, the colonizer mind came up with. Because basically the big piece is tilling is the colonizer mindset. Now we can actually talk about this stuff. It's right out there. But think about it. It's that disrespect. If not for those 12 inches of soil, we would not exist. But what do? We go in there with our heads and think, oh, create some machinery. And it's complete fallacy that you need to aerate the soil. No truth. The only reason farmers till is they can't figure out how to get rid of last year's stubble. So don't let any of your neighbors say you got to till to aerate and all that stuff. Not true.
And a question about compost, does it ever burn or is it too rich to put up against your plants?
That's a great question. Great question. The main thing with compost is when they talk about burning, it's the ammonia in the compost. If it's too fresh, as long as you put some soil on top of it, that becomes a biofilter. And so fresh manure, if you put some on your soil, as long as you cover with soil on top of it, that ammonia, which is a nitrogen, will go up through that soil, and there's nitrifying bacteria that will actually turn into a beneficial nitrogen and won't kill the plant. So basically, if you have to use fresh manure, which you probably don't want to do, but if you have to, as long as you cover it with what I call a biofilter, which is soil, it won't hurt the plants.
For growing greens, not for everything.
Yeah, I would say try to go with compost has been really well broken down, but if there's any chance that it could burn, because that's the ammonia, cover it with some soil.
Mm-hmm. Have you used coffee grounds as a mix in your mulch or layers?
Definitely, coffee's great. Coffee grounds great. We've used just about everything. Sheep wool, yeah, you could just, yeah. The whole thing is I'm an advocate, cardboard, silage, tarps, and cover crops. If you can't make 1 or 3 of those things work, that's the whole thing. Because really what happens is in the world of farming, and the paradigm has changed, but what happens is we follow somebody that came before us, so we use equipment. Once you have equipment, you spent money on it, you think, I'm just going to use it, but you're not innovating anymore. So it's all about, well, and I just commit yourself to not tilling, then you innovate. And that's really all I'm asking people to do, to experiment, because the big issue is, as we're finding out, is by not tilling, no CO2. And really, that has a huge impact on the planet. So just kind of innovate with it. But yeah.
Yeah, I love that point. And another bit is you can use the resources at hand. I saw someone mention using seaweed and the idea of using coffee grounds. Sometimes people are just looking to get rid of stuff like that.
Exactly.
The main thing is you do want to make sure your cardboard is covered, because if it's not covered, it'll dry out and then it won't decompose properly. And that seems to be the main, one of the main issues people have, as well as if it's, windy, until your cardboard gets wet, it could blow. And it's like really a bummer to see this domino effect of all this cardboard you put down. So, you can always just temporarily definitely cover it with some organic matter, but you can also throw some big rocks or a few pieces of firewood or 2x4s on it just to hold it in place until it gets wet and starts breaking down, with some other organic matter covering it.
Mm-hmm. And a couple of folks are interested to see the dibble again.
This is actually a great dibble. You really want to dibble with a little bit of a handle. It makes life a lot easier. Most of them all just have stops here, so it kind of wears on you, especially if you're planting garlic. I think we ended up planting 2 miles of it one year, or a mile or something. But yeah, this is it. This is what you're after. You can make them yourself, but it's a great little cottage industry. But this is the ticket. Basically, I have a 5-gallon bucket, has 2 pieces of rebar for my string to make a line. This tool here, a hori knife from A.M. Leonard, for pulling out the garlic, but really minimal tools. And that's what excites me about these methods, is that I really want to advocate young folks to get involved in growing food. But if they go to a conference and they see, well, I got to buy a farmland, I got to buy equipment, I got to have a barn, the paradigm's done. So if I could tell people, get a 5-gallon bucket and a few little tools, and you don't need to buy good farmland, go at it. Because really the model we're after is farm stands, every couple of miles.
The other thing is, of course, for folks with smaller amounts of space or in urban areas, again, with this intention that we have to decentralize food production to make sure food is closer to the people and that we increase food access, thinking about land, again, like Ricky was saying, that's not traditionally thought of as farmland, and how, again, we build from the ground up. Because, often, especially we, test soil if you think there might be toxicities in it. But another beauty of this method is you're building soil from the ground up, so you're not going down into the soil if there was some trace toxicity. And by creating all that microbial life, you're also, as Ricky was saying, remediating. But, that's why Grow Food Everywhere, thinking about techniques, it's accessible to many communities, to many people, building soil from the ground up, creating carbon sinks, growing food, increasing food access.
And someone asked if you can use waxed cardboard.
I don't recommend it. We don't use it. Not so crazy though is if you had really tenacious weeds and you were, I've never really done that, but it would hold up better from really tenacious weeds. Like if you weren't planning on growing any vegetable crops right away, it's worth experimenting with.
Some wax boxes, if it's not organic produce, are sprayed with a post-harvest fungicide. So if you do, like what Ricky was saying, try and, again, not, in between beds or whatever on tenacious weeds, but try and use organic produce boxes that weren't sprayed with a post-harvest fungicide.
Mm-hmm. Could you speak a little bit about rotating your beds?
Great question. That's the beautiful thing about different various tools in the toolbox is that, till I came up with this working with the tarps, I wasn't really easily able to do cover crops, but that's a nice thing. So I could have tarp, put a cover crop, let that cover crop sit, and then the next year use that area. But the method I really like, I mentioned, is that you have your beds. In one bed, vegetables 1 year, the bed next to it, cover crop. Next bed, vegetables, cover crops. So the nice thing is you can basically keep half of your garden out, growing a cover crop, using that cover crop as a mulch, and then the next year, or the second year or third year, use the cover crop bed. But really the whole thing is just kind of playing around with those three tools. Give you so much flexibility, but really what we're after is you want to keep your soil covered all the time, because the days of type A people as farmers are over. And that's basically what so many of the farmers are only, they have a lot of energy, but there's only so many of them. And they're always anxious because they're anxious. I got to till. And then as soon as I till, I got to plant. And so you're kind of in this treadmill versus keep all your land covered. You can be a lot more chill. And then you get to it when you need to get to it. But all your land's covered and it's only getting richer the longer the cardboard sits or the cover crops in the ground.
Great. I think we'll have one more question. Do you have any recommendations about further resources, written or other?
Well, first, I would highly recommend our book, Making Love While Farming, what a plug right there. Oh, another dear friend, Brian O'Hare, has got a wonderful book. Boy, what's it called?
It just came out.
Yeah. Well, Brian O'Hare's latest book. Andrew Medford did a whole book, the No-Till Organic Revolution, is a wonderful book. Also, another great person is Will Bonsall, The Resilient Gardener. I think that's what it's called. Well, Will Bonsall up in Maine, he's also has a book that came out a few years ago. Yeah. And also a shout out to Masanobu Fukuoka, One Straw Revolution. Rodale Institute also has done a lot of great work with no-till.
Stout mulching.
Well, that's great. Thank you all for joining us tonight. If you found this event inspiring and helpful, please consider becoming a member or making a donation to help us continue our important work. Thanks as well to our sponsors, Real Pickles, Dr. Bronner's, and Eaton Hub. We have several more online educational opportunities you may be interested in. Next Tuesday, we have another free event. We'll be speaking with Bob Richardson of Rocky Acres Farm in Warren, Mass., and Kate Parsons of the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Bob will discuss how he manages their pastures and hay fields in order to produce maximum quality grass for his dairy cattle, while also being a conscious steward of the land. And Kate will share practices that dairy farmers are using to protect and enhance soil health on their cornfields, including tillage reduction strategies, cover cropping, equipment upgrades to support these practices, and financial assistance that is available through NRCS. And next Friday, June 18th, we will be hosting Michael Gallagher of Square Roots Farm to learn more about their intensively managed livestock systems, as well as Connor Stedman, who will join us to explain the principles and practices of further developing pastures into silvopasture systems through functional tree planting here in New England. And NOFA's annual summer conference is going online for the first time with over 60 workshops and speakers ranging from agroforestry to vermicomposting. This year's virtual conference will not disappoint. Register today and sign up for this great opportunity to continue your education with more live events like this one. Additionally, all the events will be recorded for you to enjoy at your convenience. You can find out more about all these events on our website, nofamass.org/events. Thank you all again for being a part of the NOFAMAS community, and I look forward to seeing you next time.